Have you ever wanted to play as a sassy baby dinosaur who walks around collecting eggs and punching Cyclops cavemen, all while trying to get home before they can eat you? No? Well, too bad, because that's what we're doing today. Come sit on the couch with me as I explain one of the games that seem to be going through the cracks as time goes on, a forgotten gem of the NES. Obviously this game isn't as popular as other arcade ports like Pac-Man or Centipede, but I still think that it's definitely worth talking about, so let's do that. In fact, if any of you have seen my top 100 list, you'll know that this game rates very highly on it. In fact, it's always been at the top 20 at its lowest, so if that's not a recommendation, I don't know what is. So this is Trog, or sorry, I mean Trog! But if you look up information on this game, you'll find information for the arcade game, but as for the ports, well, they exist. There's not much more information than that. So the question becomes, is Trog a forgotten gem of the NES, or is it something that should just be forgotten and left to forgotten arcade machines, and even more forgotten ports? Let's find out together. I mean, I already just said that this is one of my favorite games of all time, which might spoil how I feel about it in the ending, but you know what? We're still going to do this, so just shut up and sit down. Trog was a game made by Acclaim in 1991 for the NES that saw you in control of one of two characters, Spike or Bloop. We had to traverse up to 50 levels, collecting eggs and avoiding Trogs. Or at least, that's what I thought as a kid. However, later on in life, recently even, discovered that it goes more like this. Trog was a game released by Midway 1 year prior in 1990 in the arcades, and included two new dinosaurs with Spike and Bloop, Rex and Gwen. What was cool about this game is that the game was done in claymation, which gave it a very nice appeal. I mean, I'm a sucker for claymation myself. I recently saw a long play for The Neverhood. Man, that's a really good game. The puzzles look like they kind of suck, but everything about the presentation and music of that game is great. I'm a sucker for stop motion. I dabbled with it a bit, just, you know, making silly sort of videos back in high school, but, you know, it's an art form that interests me greatly. So when I learned that this game came from that made me all the more interested. Of course, in this way, the arcade game would of course have better graphics, as every arcade did at the time, with much more superior hardware. The NES was never gonna be able to do a claymation style, at least not while keeping the gameplay smooth and, well, enjoyable. But the style they did go with does the job pretty well for the NES. The sprites do stand out quite nicely for the era. Or at least this is how I thought the story goes, but in actuality, in 1983, Trog released for the ZX Spectrum, a type of home computer from the early 80s, and, actually, you know what, I don't think this is the same thing. However, we aren't here to talk about the arcade original. We're here to talk about the port. The only version of this game I thought existed until my late teens. So let's unpack this game properly. See what I did there? I took it out of the packaging, aren't I funny? So as I touched on before, this game was made 1 year after the original arcade port in 1991. And there are only two playable characters, Spike and Bloop, because, well, the NES was classically a two-player system. I mean, there are a handful of four-player games, and there's this adapter you can buy for it, but that's not really... It's two-player. But the interesting thing about this game is that it actually changes up a bit depending on if you're playing this game one or two-player. It's not a Super Mario Bros. Situation where you both just wait for the other one to have their turn and then you take over. There's simultaneous play here, so it at least has that going for it. But let's unpack the differences between playing this game one-player or two-player. Most of what I'm going to be talking about, though, is the one-player stuff. And then we'll talk about what changes when you play two-player. So, let's go! So, what is the story of this game? I don't know, I don't have the manual. But relax, we do have the internet these days, so we can read it online.
Long, long ago in a land named Og, there lived a one-eyed caveman by the name of Trog, and two characters very much alike, mischievous little dynamites named Bloop and Spike. Spike and Bloop have one favorite pastime, stealing Trog eggs. Trogs have one favorite food, dynamites, like Spike and Bloop. It's a primeval recipe for adventure, especially when tar pits, bottomless chasms, and Stone Age catapults add to the perils of tasting... good. What? Luckily, Trogs eat fast, but think slow. Outsmarting even a jumping Trog takes only some fancy footwork and a dynamite left hook. Chomp away on a primitive pineapple and turn feeding time into Trog munching mayhem. Eat a hot tamale and your fireballs will char-boil a Trog quicker than a barbecue. Ready for some excitement? Ready to thump a Trog? Whew, I don't know, did I pack the condoms? Go Spike, go Bloop, first dynamite home wins.
So yeah, even now that we've learnt the story, the game really is simple as you want eggs, Trog want you, win. I mean, as far as the 80s and 90s arcade games though, we were hardly bastions for good story. We just wanted to punch things. I say as if I lived through the 90s and wasn't 5 years old when the 90s ended, but here we are. The game is a Pac-Man maze style game where your objective is to rack up the highest score by grabbing eggs, punching Trogs, and getting home to get to the next level. The NES game has 50 levels, interestingly enough one more level than the arcade version. You must collect every egg on screen, at which point a home space will appear somewhere randomly on the map, and you have to get all the eggs and home without getting killed. I mean, I should probably go without saying, and most objectives in life also have the don't get killed part on them. It's in the fine print somewhere, I think. And when you do get home, what you get is your reward. One of the best damn dances this side of the 8-bit era. How do you even dance like that? Yeah! I'm pumped! What am I doing with my life? What is even going on? I love I love Spike's one. I love Spike's one the best, but they're both amazing. There are a few different types of Trogs in this game with different behaviour patterns. You of course start with your basic Trog, not too fast and not smart enough to really set any traps, which we will get to later. And only go for the basic bash move and try to eat you. You have your trap setting Trogs who bash holes in the ground you can fall down into and die as well as eat. We also have our fire Trogs who set fire that will burn you to a charred crisp if you land on it. We have your fast Trogs who can be a pain and very tricky to try and get away from if you aren't paying attention, and we have our wheel enemies and the Trogs who throw them. If you're fast enough, you can take out the Trogs who throw the wheels in a couple of hits. However, miss them and they will release an insanely fast wheel onto the field. You can't outrun these, so you have to be sure to not get in their way. Plus, they almost always spawn in levels with these little squares in the middle, where they constantly roll around the middle, making the eggs here something you really have to strategize for and make sure you don't get squished. And finally you have those bloody bum-fucking Trogs that jump around all over the damn place and make me want to break my controller in half! These Trogs jump around like crazy and relentlessly track you down by bouncing all over the place like their mum gave them too much cocaine, and they will crush you if even a pixel of your body lands on their jump space and they can bugger off! But, luckily, these jumpy guys are only in a handful of levels, but those levels, for me at least, were where all my lives drained like mad. Most of the time, these Trogs just stay on their own level, or a mix of wheel guys and normal guys. There are only a handful of levels that combine any of these types, so depending on the world you're in, you can plan accordingly. There are a few different world themes in this game. You have your original theme, that's just a straight up grid with eggs on it, and then you have your maze-like level with a few obstacles in your path to make navigation a bit harder, but overall, this is just basic map again, nothing too interesting. Level 8 is where some of the cooler mechanics come into play. The level is the first with war barriers, Entering one of these warp caves places you in the other cave with the corresponding symbol. Circle, triangle, diamond, etc. Some of these areas can only be accessed through these warps, and you can't just go wherever you want on the map without them. Next, you have what Kid Me always referred to as ice levels, but really it's just the same, but the ground's blue. This map is where the rolling wheel enemies come into play. An outside grid with a small square in the middle, where wheels constantly roam ready to squish you if you're too slow or not powered up. All the strategy here comes from when you exit the square, and whether you're going to risk it for those couple of eggs, or leave the square and approach it again from another angle. The wheels are almost impossible to punch before they squash you, but I say almost. It is possible sometimes. I don't know, it seems like the game is generous sometimes and they'll let you repel them if you spam hard enough. Next up is the jumping stage, and my god, I mean, it's very creative and everything, but these enemies can suck a big one. The core of this map is that you are in one big grid, but with these 4 jump pads on the 4 corners of the map, that bounce you to one of the other corners. Using this stuns you for a little bit, which is fine for now. But later on, this can be a big problem. But we'll get to that later. For now, decent design. But the jumpy trogs are again such a pain. The next type of map isn't too much to talk on. It's your basic grid with 4 solid blocks that you have to traverse around. The only thing that makes this really special is that these maps use the much faster trogs, so watch out and don't get trapped by a block. That's pretty much the only strategy you can have, apart from spam that punch button. The beach level. Now this one is interesting because it is the reason I say mostly to every rule. Mostly the enemy trog types just stick to 1 per level, except here. Mostly the teleport caves take you to places you can only get to with them, except here. There are jumpy guys here. But yeah, this level is actually really cool because it just slaps everything together and really tests your skills on each type of enemy, a bunch of the traps and terrain, some of the extra features, and also isn't just your normal grid map, it has some things in the way. So, I don't know, it's pretty interesting that they have something like this to combine it all. The beach levels are very, very nice. Now that we're getting into the late game, we have these interesting levels that are 2 separate grids that can only be gotten to from the access point in the form of ladders? Bridges? Donuts? I don't know. Yeah, the perspective doesn't really help here. I always thought they were ladders as a kid, but that doesn't really make sense. Bridges do make the most sense. You start with having 2 bridges to get back and forth from, but in the next level you've only got one access point to get between the grids, so you have to make sure you don't get mobbed here, and choose when you want to cross. Don't get too comfy though, because eventually they take away every bridge, and now the only way to jump between the grids is with the jumping pads. Now remember what I said when that couple of second stun isn't too bad in the other levels? It's a small cost to pay for being able to fly across the map. Very rarely will an enemy take you out while you're stunned. Well, these couple of levels are where that stun can get really bad and really mess you up. The trogs on the grid below you aren't going to stop, and the second you fly over there, they will chase you down. And they can smack you down and devour you before you even get a chance to move, which can be really unfair. But I guess you just have to try and move them away from the area you're going to be able to jump from. Anyways, level 37 and 48 are interesting, and the last type of land in the game, where it is this odd non-grid design, and you only have this middle path to get through the 2 sides of the map. It's basically like that last map, we had the top and the bottom and 1 ladder. But this time you've only got 1 strip of land connecting 2 side paths, but it is interesting to see this like little H shape. Honestly, it's a very small detail, but that little visual change is actually quite welcome. These might be one of my, as a kid, these were probably one of my favourite levels look-wise. And because you'd always know shit was getting real by level 48, because you were so close to the end and you only really ever had 1 or 2 lives left by that point, so pressure was really fucking on. If you try and go through the top or bottom of this map, you'll fall off into the sea, or in the case of map 48, the River of Blood. Metal, I guess? Ah, lovely. I guess this is where all the Trogs you defeated have been going. And that's all the levels in the game. For a small little arcadey beat-em-up game like this, there's actually a lot of variety here, and a lot of things to keep you going for all 50 levels. It's not the same 2 or 3 basic map designs that'll have you bored by level 8 or 9. The maps go very quickly, there's a lot of variety, and it definitely holds your attention. Which, honestly, is great for a game like this. You really need to be able to keep the person sucked into the game if you're going to expect them to go through 50 levels. I know back in the day, going through level after level, the same thing was kind of par for the course. But, you know, as a kid growing up in the early 2000s, who already had a Nintendo 64 and an NES at the same time, something like this for me was really needed, because I never got into sort of Pac-Man and stuff like that, because it was just repetitive. But I never got that repetitive feeling from this game, and that's everything. The fact that it doesn't feel repetitive. It's a big plus. Okay, we've covered enemies, we've covered levels. Let's talk about the butt-kicking power-ups we have here, and oh my lord. Oh my sweet summer child. Who drew these power-ups in the game manual? I love you. These are amazing. Truly, we are seeing Vectrex in colour for the first time here. It's simply astounding. But seriously, we have power-ups and power-downs. Basic stuff. The most basic and best power-up is the red flower. The red flower speeds you up, making it a lot easier to get away from Trogs, and very important on any level with wheels, as these red flowers can stack, and eventually you can outrun the wheels to a certain extent, making these levels a lot less of a chore. It also helps not to be outrun by fast Trogs, so you aren't always having to change direction to not get eaten. We have the Ice Cube, which freezes Trogs for a short amount of time, but also, very nicely, you can get rid of the Trogs in one hit instead of 3 or 4. Also, it freezes the wheels, which is your second best way of getting rid of them, and getting the eggs they protect. The Lucky Horseshoe makes you invincible for a small amount of time. Unfortunately, later on in the levels, when you would actually need it more, the time that it's active for gets shorter and shorter to a ridiculously useless amount, making this the least useful power-up in the game. Because early on, when you don't need it, it stays around for... I mean, it doesn't even stay around for too long anyway. It stays around for a little bit, but not really. And by the time you get halfway through the game where things actually get to be a challenge, it's literally 2 or 3 seconds, and then it's gone again. It's very, very situational. You need to have one spawn right where you're going to be in danger for it to actually save you. And even then, an ice block or other item will probably help you a lot more in that scenario, and be able to be used as you continue going on to burn other Trogs or freeze other Trogs. Next we have the Flame... Hot Dog? Seriously, until I started making this video, I thought these were some weird type of fire hot dog, but apparently these are hot tamales. I've never heard of a tamale in my life, especially not as a kid, so of course I would have no idea what the hell this thing is. Point is, you eat it, and you shoot fire out your mouth. And those Trogs who are burning you to a crisp, well now it's your turn to burn them back. Nice. I'm a sadistic bastard, apparently. Now we have some bad items as well. What we have here are fire pits that, as I said back on the Trog descriptions, are made by the fire Trogs, and we also have tar pits. These appear naturally in the levels and will kill you slowly, sinking you down into a black abyss. Forever. Lovely. Now the funny thing with all these fires, pits, and tar pits is that the Trogs aren't all that smart, and they can also end up falling in these traps. Sometimes once they even set up themselves. Sometimes they'll light a fire, walk one space away, come back and burn on their same fire, so... I don't know. Sometimes you feel bad for getting caught by these things with how ridiculously stupid they are, but here we are. Now the final real item is the pineapple, which turns you from a baby dino into a massive fucking T-Rex! Biting down on Trogs and wheels for a one-hit kill, stamping out fires, tar pits, and jumping over pitfalls. Now this is the best way to take out the wheels and, well, everything. This is the best item in the game. It keeps you invincible, lets you attack things, and also lasts a lot more than 2 or 3 seconds. Which pretty much means that the horseshoe is useless with this thing in the game. And honestly, you might be thinking, well, obviously the horseshoe, you know, with items like this, the horseshoe will appear a lot more, and sometimes you'll get a pineapple here or there. You know, the more powerful items in a game spawn less. No, not with Trog. In fact, actually, it's the other way around. The horseshoe is the rarer item. You'll find pineapples a lot more often than you'll find horseshoes. In fact, you'll find pineapples at the same rate you find the hot tamales and the ice cubes. The only thing that's more common than the pineapple are the speed up power-ups, the red flowers, and what we'll talk about, the slowdown power-ups, the mushrooms. So, yeah, just the horseshoe is completely useless. And of course, the last bad item in the game, like I just said, is the slowdown mushroom. The slowdown mushroom is basically the bad version of the speed up flower. Obviously, I really need to explain that. But yes, these two can also stack. So watch out, because if you grab a few of these, you're in serious trouble. And I love that in the level with the wheels and the square, these mushrooms spawn the most there out of any other place in the level. So you can just stack mushrooms and just be completely useless and die to the wheels over and over again. Luckily, the mushroom effects disappear once you've lost a life, so you can come back from this. But then again, the speed you get from the red flowers also disappears when you lose a life, so bit of give and take there, but I think it's worth it. You wouldn't want to be slow for the whole level and be just dead. Finally, the last thing that can appear is the warp pads. These things look like pitfalls, a lot like pitfalls. In fact, if you aren't paying attention, you might think that this is a pitfall and avoid it. However, there is a little spiral in the middle. These things are tricky because they really like to appear when you've already collected all the eggs. In fact, 90% of the time, if a warp pad spawns, it's going to be after you've collected all the eggs and are really close to walking back home. Usually they'll spawn when you're almost at home and you're not paying attention to anything else on the map. You're signaling, you're gunning for that home space, and then you hit home, you look at the screen one more time, and then you see there's a warp pad over there and you go, oh, well, shit, I wasn't paying attention. So, what's so good about the warp pad? Well, the warp pad lets you move 3 levels ahead. Very useful stuff if you're trying to get to the end. And if you don't want to use the warp pad because you want to go for a high score, and the warp pad would make it so you don't get a high score, well, guess what? The warp pad also awards you 300,000 points. And every 500,000 points you get in this game, you get a life, which means that you're almost guaranteed to get a life when you use the warp pad. The only reason you wouldn't get a life by using the warp pad is if you've just very recently gotten a life before, or you're already at the max capacity for lives you can get per continue. I think you can only get 2 extra lives for a continue, and I think even if you lose all your lives, you still won't actually gain any, so you only get 2 extra lives. So basically, there are a lot of advantages to the warp pad, and almost no disadvantages, except maybe if you're playing the game for the first time and want to see all the levels. But yeah, apart from that, warp pad all the way. Helps you with your score, getting to your levels, and getting your lives. It's amazing. Best thing in the game. And you also get to see this cool cinematic every time you get into it. Wow! I love that. It's not just one big wow. It's 10. It's just wow, wow, wow. The whole screen is wow. When you got a massive screen like we have now, our big flat screen TVs we have now, just seeing whoa! It's great. So enough about the wow factor. How does this game control? With a controller. Now I'm gonna go now. Well, for the most part, this game controls really well. Sometimes it can be a little stiff moving your little dino around. Sometimes I swear I press a direction only for him to not move at all and just keep going in the straight line he's in, which happens more with my actual gamepad and not with my, oh, it's still connected to it, but my NES Classic. The gamepad there is, I guess, a lot better because when I'm playing on an original NES, when I'm playing on this, it might also be my copy of this game, who knows, but when I'm playing on this, a lot of the times the inputs don't count and then I just jump off the cliff, off the level. But on the NES Classic, that's never happened to me. So again, I don't know if it's my copy of the game or the original gamepads, but it controls better emulated. So there you go. I just wanted to show that I have the original game before I started talking about having it on the NES Classic, because it wasn't originally on there, so let's just before Nintendo knocked out the door. And that's also something I should probably talk about, the fact that I'm talking about all this stuff about grids and collecting eggs, but the Trogs aren't the only thing that'll kill you. And I don't know why I'm talking about this through the control section, and I don't know why I've just let the controller slip off my leg. But here we are. So yes, this game is just a big grid, but if you walk off the grid, you'll jump off into the cliff, water, whatever it is down below. Honestly, the color changes, so I'm sure it's meant to be like a night, day, sunset thing, but when you've got red liquid, usually the mine doesn't go to a nice, beautiful sunset, it goes to absolute death and destruction. But the thing is that you're not the only one that can fall into the river. In fact, I didn't actually fall into the lake at all while recording this footage. In fact, while I'm recording the two-player footage, editor's note for myself, I might throw myself off the cliff on purpose so we can put it here. Let's see if I've put it here anyway, hopefully I have. But the thing is that, like with the traps, where the Trogs can also fall into these traps, the Trogs can also jump off these cliffs. The Trogs that are going to do this the most are the fast Trogs, because the fast Trogs are really gunning for you. They're just flying at you, and if you turn at the last second, what's really cool about this game is that you think that the fast Trogs will just turn, like immediately turn, like the AI would just be like, but it's not. What's really cool about the Trog AI, especially the fast Trog AI, is that if you trick them, sometimes they can't stop themselves. So they'll just over into the water. So yeah, the fact that this game has AI that sometimes can't stop themselves when they're in a full sprint and just jump into the water, honestly blows my mind a lot for a game like this. I don't know if that's impressive to anyone else, but honestly, for a game from 1990, 1991, the fact that we had AI that was smart enough to be programmed to, like, not be able to stop themselves, like, it's kind of like that old sort of cartoony trope where someone's, like, really sprinting and then you just see them, like, skirting on their heels, like, dust kicking up, trying to stop themselves, like, oh! I don't know, it's kind of like Wile E. Coyote, almost. And the scream that they make being very like Wile E. Coyote, Tom and Jerry doesn't help that comparison, but I think that's great. I love the cartooniness of it, and I think it's amazing. I just wanted to put this little section in here to applaud them for putting that, the thought for that into this game, and making it even more common for the fast Trogs to do it than the slow Trogs. That's just, it blew my mind. I just wanted to talk about it, okay? It's a video about Trog. Let's, yes! The punching and the shooting of the fireballs in this game are also very satisfying. You can spam that button and punch super fast. In fact, in later levels, it's required that you spam that punch button as fast as you can, and it's so satisfying to see the Trog fly off the screen to successfully take him out. Oh! He was going for his knife. That never gets old. Just seeing them like almost about to punch you, just yes! I'm getting way too pumped up about it, but it's true, I love that so much. And honestly, there isn't that much more to the controls of this game. It's very simple. You move around with the D-pad, and you punch. And that's it, and that's all it has to be. In fact, I don't even think the A button gets used. So, there you go. And that's about the thick of it. For all the one-player stuff, and the stuff that's in both 1 and 2-player. But like I said, this game does change up a bit when you bring in a second controller. I don't have a second controller to prove that. I had the bone controller for the top loader, and then it's disappeared. And I spent like 10 minutes before this video trying to find it, and I couldn't. And I'm very annoyed, because that was one of my favorite controllers, and it works a lot better than this one. And I'm very annoyed. There are 2 ways to play this game. You can team up and try and get through all 50 levels, or you can fuck with each other to see who can get the highest score. See, in 1 player, every egg on the screen is yours. However, in 2 player, you each have your own coloured eggs to collect. Collect all yours and home opens up, but only for you. The other player can't go into your home. They have to get all their eggs, and then they will have their home pop up somewhere else on the map. You can stun the other player by punching them. The animation looks a lot like when you get beaten down by a Trog to get eaten, although in this you'll actually get back up. But when it gets to some of the later levels, being stunned like that can be devastating. You're almost certain that a Trog is going to come and eat you unless they're all on like the other side of the grid. It can be devastatingly harsh. And it's like Mario levels of ruining friendships. If you hit someone and they get eaten because you've stunned them, oh, chairs will fly. However, because you're also standing there and punching them yourself, you just might leave yourself open to an attack, so be careful. On the flip side of this, if the other player is knocked down by a Trog, you have 2 seconds before they start to get gobbled down, and you can actually save them by punching away the Trog, which is very useful if you want to team up to get to level 50. But as soon as that Trog gets that first bite, it doesn't matter. You can knock the Trog away after the Trog's only had one bite, but they're not going to let you walk around with like half your face missing. So it doesn't matter if they've had one bite or you're nothing but skeleton. You have to save them before any bites happen. Now this actually changes for the last 10 levels, everyone having their own separate eggs, as the eggs become one color again, and now it's a race to collect the most of them and get home first. The home now being for both of you. But if you're already teaming up to try and get to the end, then this just pushes that even further. Probably by the time you've gotten to level 40, you're going to start to want to see the end. So I do like the fact that at this point it does get a little more teamy. But if you really just want to be dicks to each other, you probably didn't make it to level 40 anyway because you're too busy killing each other. So, I mean, it's a nice thing for them to do, for people who actually team up, because I've never played a game where we fuck with each other, where we've gotten as high as even level 30, because you can just kill each other way too easily. And now we really have gone over everything there is to this game. The main part of the game. But there's something else about this game that separates it from your other level-to-level, old-school arcade shooters, side-scrollers and things like that. Why did I say side-scrollers? You know what I mean. Those old games. And that's the fact that the base levels are actually broken up with some mini-games, which is a really nice and cool break. So let's go and break down what these mini-games are. There are 3 types. Collect the gems, eat the Trogs, and burn every last man, woman, and child alive until there's no one left to mourn. Kill them all! These games are almost impossible to complete one player, with the exception of the gem collecting game, but the other 2 really need 2 players for a chance to actually getting to the end of it. But of course, the only prize for winning is more points and bragging rights. There is no life loss or any penalty for not getting everything in the level. These are just bonus levels after all. However, like I said, when you get a certain amount of points, you do get a precious extra life, and you can't die in these levels, so it's a nice little break to try and score yourself more lives with no risk to your existing lives. And of course, what is level 50? The final level? Your reward for getting this far is the Burn All the Trogs minigame. Take the fight back to them, and show them once and for all who's boss. So overall, what did I think of the game? Well, honestly, there is just something so timeless to these old arcade games like Pac-Man, Centipede, the original Mario Brothers, just Donkey Kong, all these little games we just keep going back to, very simple, just level-to-level games. But this one was different. It had some advanced AI for the time, some advanced mechanics, it had a lot of mini-games, it had a lot of power-ups, it had a lot of items. This game really was the evolution. Now, I know I keep comparing it to games from the early 80s, and this game was a very early 90s. Well, I guess it was being developed in the late 80s, but you know, it's a very early 90s game. Which is why I think this honestly is the evolution of those types of games. Honestly, it's this weird sort of... I see this game as this weird sort of branching path between these games where you all sort of go for points, and these games where there's like an ending to them. And I guess the NES as a whole was kind of like that. Games where you really were going for points, but games more and more had endings to them, reasons to keep going. We had games like Mega Man, Zelda, Mario, where, yeah, points were a factor, especially in Mario, but really it was to get to the end of the game. But also on the NES were games where you just wanted to get the highest score. So it was this weird sort of middle ground between those early arcade games and the Super Nintendo's adventurous, expanding series. And honestly, I think in that little bubble of the NES where we were shifting from one sort of gameplay style to the other, Trog was the perfect evolution to that we needed. This game takes all the best parts of those old arcade levels, but adds so much to them and adds the replayability we now expect when we went to the Super Nintendo, the PS1, and the Nintendo 64 era. So, yeah, honestly, this is a great little... I guess you could call this a missing link game. Because cavemen... No, but honestly, this is a truly exceptional game. I love it. I keep going back to it all the time. I would love to play this game with more people, show it off more, play it with friends. It's just a great game all around. Honestly, I've seen Pac-Man and games like that step up what they're doing over the years, even into the 360 era. But this feels like the next true step in the pure Pac-Man original gameplay, and how to take the formula to the right places. The combat is very satisfying when it does work, the minigames are fun distractions, and the music is good. However, I must admit, it is a little bit repetitive because they don't have the biggest music selection. It's kind of just the same couple of songs, but the couple of songs that are there are pretty good. Didn't warrant enough to get its own section, but I've been playing it throughout the reviews, so you know by now if you like it or not. Honestly, my opinion is, overall, this is one of the most solid experiences you can get on the NES outside of Nintendo's first-party games. They really ran with it. They made a great game despite the limitations of the system. Of course, one day I would love to play the claymation arcade version of Trog, but for what we could get in our homes at the time, this was a very solid substitute. I played this game, honestly, for so many hours, hundreds as a kid, I don't even want to think. The game is very near and dear to my heart, and honestly, I don't think enough people know about this game. If you get the chance, I absolutely highly recommend you checking this game out. Through any means necessary, honestly. I don't support piracy, but if you can't play it on an original NES, and you can get on like your NES Classic or something, or just on computer, do it. It's an experience that you really should try out, if nothing more for just a little bit of entertainment. It's a half hour of fun. What can go wrong? Especially if retro gaming is your kind of scene. But anyway, thank you guys so much for making this far. Hopefully this was somewhat entertaining. I really hope it was. I spent a lot of time scripting this and everything. This is honestly the longest review video I've ever made because I've actually put a script to it and done like stuff. I have made videos kind of similar to this every once in a blue moon, but this is the one that I'm really sort of banking on hopefully being good. So, yep. Please let me know what you like. Please let me know what I should improve next time. I know the camera angle's really shit here, but my tripod broke and this is the only way I could record this stuff, so yeah. Sorry about that. If you did like this video, you can support the channel and me by just liking and subscribing. I don't make any money off my videos, so honestly, just like and subscribe, and that's enough for me. Just let me know that you liked the video. I'd love to do more videos like this, so yeah. Hey guys, let's start out again. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this review if you've made it all the way this far. A bit of a weird camera angle going on. I've literally got the camera positioned on a water like jug, so a bit weird. But yeah, I really do want to start making more reviews like this. Of course, I love the NES and the N64, especially for weird, obscure memories from my childhood, because back then I just played whatever games I could, and there was a lot more room of experimenting, whereas nowadays when I buy my own games, I just sort of go with what's the popular and like games and series that I already enjoy and stuff like that. But with the NES and the N64, I've got this, I can get a little more detailed, and yeah, I'd love to make more like this. I've already got another game in the works that I'd love to make a video on, but in the meantime, a few years ago I actually made another review. I made a review on Snowboard Kids 2, a pretty rare Nintendo 64 game. A lot of people seem to remember Snowboard Kids 1, but Snowboard Kids 2 was the one I played, and it was 3 years ago I made a review on it, a bit less than 3 years ago, but all the same, if you want to see that, check in the comments and the description to see that review. and I guess this is review number 2, unless there's one I've forgotten about. I mean, in 2012 I did a review for The Simpsons Hit and Run, but in 2012, I don't like that era of me, and reviews were a bit too much for me. I was still using Windows Movie Maker, and doing complex edits like I have with Snowboard Kids 2 and the Trog review were a bit too much for me. So it's very sort of basic stuff. Did the best I could for 2012 in Windows Movie Maker, but there you go. So I'm just gonna link the Snowboard Kids 2 one. So anyway, that's my rambling. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope to make more. If you liked it, like the video. Take care.